So I think we can start. Welcome to our webinar. Topic of today is Principles of Good Reporting. My name is Ariane Hofstetter. I'm responsible for the methodology of the Global ESG Monitor, and together with me, Claudius. Claudius, would you like to introduce our audience to the Q&A tool?
Sure. Thank you. Also, a very warm welcome from my side. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A function in the menu bar down below, and we will be happy to answer your questions at the end of the webinar. So, Ariane, back to you.
Thank you. Well, for those of you who already know us, a little bit of repetition in the beginning, introducing ourselves. For those who don't know us yet, I hope you learned something new. Today's topic, as I said, is showcasing best practices in sustainability reporting. And why do we showcase best practices? That's why we have made quality in sustainability reporting our main mission as the Global ESG Monitor. We started in 2020, and since back then we have analyzed more than 1,300 reports from over 500 companies coming from 70 industries and 4 continents. We understand ourselves as a think tank for sustainability reporting from a corporate perspective. That means we want to be very useful for companies trying to improve their sustainability reporting by delivering data. Our methodology is promoted by Bundesministerium für Bildung und Forschung, which is the Ministry for Research and Education, if I translate this correctly, and they grant us with a so-called Forschungszulage for our research. This year, I showed you we have analyzed many companies from many continents. This year, we have a mainly German sample, 194 companies in total, 40 from DAX, 50 from MDAX, and 69 from SDAX, and 35 from a selection of privately held companies or European companies, which supplement our DAX family sample. If you wonder why only 69 companies in SDAX, that's due to a cybercrime for one of the companies. They were not able to deliver their report on time, so we couldn't analyze this company, and we have one less here than the actual index size. How do we do it? How do we measure quality? And the first thing I would like to point out is that our quality definition comes from different standards. So it's the Global Reporting Initiative and UNGC and TCFD as the older standards, and then the ESRS from EFRAG and the IFRS 1 and 2 for the newer standards. They are included in our methodology, which comprises more than 1,000 questions so far and 5,000 variables. And we also have a clear source for our research, which is the annual report and the separate report. So those reporting formats for which the companies can be held reliable of. And then we have a 3-way approach. So we do not use artificial intelligence because artificial intelligence is overwhelmed by the great variety of sustainability reporting so far. Human intelligence makes the better results, but as we all know, also humans make mistakes. Therefore, we have a 3-way approach, having our reports analyzed by one auditor, then running a second evaluation, and then difference between analysis 1 and analysis 2 are then solved by our auditing team. And the only way we use artificial intelligence in our process is to track the performance of our auditors. So we look for answer patterns or we look for speeders, just to make sure that everything is of high quality and everyone is committed to high quality, which our analysts are. That's what we can say from working together with them for quite some time now. We're really proud of our team. When we talk about sustainability reporting principles, there's one thing which is very important from my side. So what the European Union plans is a sustainable transition of the economy. and the sustainability reporting principles form the basis for high quality reporting and therefore make a very important contribution. And I would like to look together with you into CSRD. It's very interesting. If you run through CSRD, you have many spots where CSRD is talking about the low quality in reporting and the need for a robust reporting framework. I have brought you one quotation, which is the aspect 13 of CSRD. And there you can read about their fitness checks they have done and the conclusion to which they came, which is that the reporting quality is not good enough, which has to do with limited comparability and reliability of sustainability information, with the need for information which is not mandatory and therefore not to be found in every report, and the need for a robust and affordable reporting framework that is accompanied by effective auditing practices to ensure the reliability of data and prevent greenwashing and double counting. If you look at the words which are in this description of why CSRD is needed, then you see the first principles, which we will meet later on again, which is materiality, comparability, reliability, completeness, and auditability. What is really interesting about the last term is that when we hear auditability, we think of the auditor then coming and checking the sustainability report for reasonable or limited assurance. But what the EU is planning is a broader approach to auditing by having the stakeholders accountable for driving forward the sustainable transformation of the economy. So they say all stakeholders are held accountable, and then they mention two groups, which you here can find on the right side, which are particularly relevant from a CSRD perspective. The one groups are those which we can call stakeholders financing the Green Deal. The quote would be investors, including asset managers who want to better understand the risk and opportunities of sustainability issues for their investments and the impact of such investments on people and the environment. And the second group, which I think is very interesting, are those stakeholders who ensure that companies live up to their responsibilities. The quote, civil society actors, including non-governmental organizations and social partners who want to hold companies more accountable for their impact on people and the environment. And there's also a third group, which is mentioned by CSRD in paragraph 12 of the CSRD text, that I say what you see on the left side, the companies themselves, who are to be motivated to actively address sustainability issues in accordance with the measure to manage principles. And the benefits which are pointed out are advantages for better access to capital, better resilience, better communication with stakeholders, and less ad hoc requests for information. So what we can state at this point is that the sustainability report is more than a document. It's more or less an internal and external controlling tool for all the actors involved in sustainability reporting, coming from the outside or the inside of the companies. You remember that I said that CSRD is starting with giving their results for their fitness tests. We have done such a fitness test too by evaluating quality in sustainability reporting. And what you can see here is that the quality of reporting is still very disparate. And this is a key problem still in 2024, even though the first CSRD ESRS compliant reports are due soon. And we already have the first early adopters, which already have delivered and published CSRD ESRS compliant reports. So what you see here on the left side is the total average, which is 45 points from 100 maximum reachable points. The best in class scores 79 points and the last in class only 13. So if you look at the bars and the difference between the bars, you see how different the quality in reporting is. On the left side, you have the theoretical approach to quality, where we took our scale from 0 to 100 points, divided it into 4, and also show the quartiles of the results. So the average is still in the second lowest quartile. On the right side, you have the empirical approach to quality, where you see that we have 21 companies in the gold and silver star categories, which are the best of the reporting season we have analyzed. And we have a bigger chunk of companies in the bronze and the rising sector, which also show good quality reporting, also taking into account that ESRS is already in our methodology, but only due starting from next year. When we talk about reporting principles, what is important for me is the headline. It's all about contextualization. So contextualization means that we have to give context on how information was compiled, to give context on insights which were gathered to come to the conclusion, for example, for materiality, and that principles of good reporting are followed. Those principles were not made up by the Global ESG Monitor. The first set of ideas came from the Global Reporting Initiative in our methodology, and they differ between those principles for identifying the content, which would be stakeholder inclusiveness, sustainability, context, and materiality. And then those principles which characterize a high quality report, these would be balance, comparability, accuracy, timeliness, comprehensibility, and reliability. If you remember what I showed from the CSRD text, you see that there is some overlapping already. But when we dive deeper into ESRS and take a look in ESRS 1 as the cross-cutting standard and look at the reporting principles, then we see that they set out relevance, which is materiality, completeness, understandability, comparability, reliability and accuracy, timeliness, consistency. Sorry. So you see that GRI was one of the stakeholders forming those expectations, what they thought is a good principle of reporting. You can find also in ESRS and also in our methodology. The only thing the Global ESG Monitor has added on top is the dimension of accessibility of information and reports, which we think is necessary to enable stakeholders to find the information they need in order to make judgments on the extent and nature of their interactions with those companies. For this webinar, I would like to take a closer look to 3 topics. The first is sustainability focus, where we talk about materiality and strategy. Then I want to take a look at stakeholder inclusiveness, and last but not least, value chain reporting. This is already a big amount of information I hope you can process. The first question companies ask us when we talk about ESRE's compliance and the next year's report is, how many pages should a report or sustainability information have in the annual report? And we have asked our analysts to register the pages first of the annual report and then the amount of sustainability information within those reports. And you can see that the median, which is the average without those extreme values, is 67 pages. Last year, it was 41 pages. So it has already increased dramatically. And then if you look at the different sectors, which we display below that graph, you can see automotive is lower than the average with 63 pages. And our banking sample with 143 pages has the most extent reporting on sustainability information within the annual report already. To this annual report, most of the companies have already also delivered a separate report, and our quality definition comes from both reports. It was an aggregated analysis which we had run, so it's not only this just in case you are wondering. The next question companies ask us is, how many topics should be considered material? What do other companies do? And here we have given out the average. So you see the average for our whole sample, which is the 195 companies, is 5.7 material topics. And you see that DAX and GEM selected have a little higher number than MDAX and SDAX. A minimum selection was 3 material topic areas, and the maximum selection was all 10 material topic areas. What is important to take into consideration is the more material topics you define, the larger the reporting curriculum is. So if we look at results and we have a result from a company which has 10 topics, then they had more effort to reach the points they did than a company with less material topics. If you now think, oh, it's better to have little material topics, then we would like to warn you, because effort is only one side of the coin. The other one we talked about within the principles already is completeness. So if material issues are overlooked or not sufficiently addressed, this could have negative consequences. Think about the stakeholders who are taking into account to overview or to control the companies with their reporting. And if a company has a lack of transparency or commitment, this could weaken the trust in the company. Here I brought you a screenshot just to show you one example of why we think it's very important to think about completeness when we talk about materiality. This screenshot comes from our benchmark report, where I have taken randomly one energy company and have run it against the peer group of energy companies in our sample. And you see the topics relevant to the company, which are with a check mark marked in the table. And then you see the average of relevance to peers in percent. So for climate, 100%, for governance, 100%, there is no question. But let's take a look at biodiversity, 4th row. You see, this is not a material topic for our company, but for 50% of the other peers, it is material. Pollution, there's also a contrast with no material topic for our company and 30% of the peers. So those kind of things, they can cause irritation, because we wonder, why is this the case that these topics are not relevant to the company we're taking a look at? So to ensure that no topic is forgotten, we recommend that companies we support as part of their materiality analysis include comparative data in the screening process to identify IRO as impacts, risks, and opportunities. And this can be peer group data, this can be data from topic platforms or from associations. One example is the NCORE Nature platform, which is supported by the UN, amongst others, which I will describe on a little bit later again. And then we have the UNEP sector impact maps. That's the United Nations Environment Program Finance Initiative, which is also relevant for banks and investors who are in the principle of responsible banking or responsible investing. So by looking at financial materiality, those impact maps can be very interesting for the companies and help them to make sure that no topic is forgotten. What I'm showing you here is how the material topics in the reports published in 2024 were determined. And you see that most of the companies report on conducting a materiality assessment in more detail, but only 59% already talk about having done a double materiality assessment. I would like you to memorize this number 59%, because we will talk about this in a little bit again when I show you another result. What we can learn at this point is that ESRS makes the process of materiality analysis more demanding, and the two perspectives which have to be taken into account is impact perspective and financial materiality perspective. And this is quite challenging for the companies. That's what we experienced and heard many times. Well, which topics are important for the companies? Let's take a look at that. And you see that we can state that the companies come from one tradition of reporting, which is the ESG tradition. And E here in the topic of climate, which has the most regulatory pressure for the companies, then G, the governance topic, and S, the own workforce. Those are already very good anchored in the reports. And you see that other topics which are more new are not that highly regulated so far. They are less or more seldomly in the reports. What we were surprised is the low number of pollution being held as material. Only 12% of the companies say that this is a material topic. We will dive in this in a second again. What we expect is when the number of reports increase that can report about assessing materiality with a double materiality perspective, we think that this frequency of topics will change. And I show you why. This has to do with interdependencies of topics. And as an example, I show you E1, which is the climate topic. 100%, you remember, have already identified a material topic in this topical area. And the ESRS emphasized that there are interaction between the topics. If you look in the standards, it's mostly right in the front. You can see what other topical standards have to be taken into account. In this case, one would be biodiversity, but only 28% of the companies define, which is E4 here, diversity as a material topic. So there are some things which might surprise one and which could lead to the question, how can we assess the completeness of materiality analysis? I said completeness is one really important reporting principle. To look at completeness, we have to look on how the materiality was evaluated. And we see the second tradition from which the companies come is the CSR tradition, corporate social responsibility. And this is a tradition which is more connected to the impact perspective. And you see that already 60% are giving more information on how evaluating their impact materiality, whereas the dimension of financial materiality is quite new. Only 30% show how they have evaluated this dimension. I asked you to remember the value for the amount of companies who have done a double materiality assessment, which was 59, and you see only 30 then go deeper and give more detail on how they have evaluated the second perspective. Why is the second perspective so important? Because if you look at the traditional definition of sustainability, that's the triple bottom line approach, or the three pillars of sustainability, which is environment, social, and economics being the same of the same importance. I said I come back to our Encore platform, and here I show you why it is so difficult for us to understand if the material topic lists are complete. That has to do that most of the companies do not deliver an explanation of non-materiality. So now you could say, well, ESRS does not require us to do this. That's one of the voluntary aspects, as long as it's not a climate topic. But still, if we look at the results for, let's say, our engineering sample, none of them have pollution as a material topic. So since this was surprising to us, we went into the Encore platform and we found the information that there are 2 pollution areas in which Encore analysis says that there is medium to high materiality rating, which is soil pollutants and non-GHG air pollutants. We insert the screenshots here to give you an impression on how this looks like. You see there you can get more data by following the fact sheets or explore the maps. It's a really good platform to understand dependencies and different aspects on companies and nature. When I talked about context, I mentioned that the GRI has 3 principles on how material topics or on how topics are identified, or the content of the reports is identified, and one is contextualization. And the traditional meaning of context in this case was that the companies do not only report on their efforts, on their results, but they also show on how they contribute to overarching social topics. And one way to look at it would be the Paris Agreement. Another way would be the Sustainable Development Goals of the 2030 Agenda. And you see the priorities of which the companies set. 84 say they make a contribution to the SDG. And those SDGs which are prioritized are those with a direct economic and regulatory impact, such as climate action, which is SDG 13, 71%, SDG 8 as decent work and economic growth, 66%. And you see that other topics like SDG 1, which is no poverty, they only reach 18%, or SDG 2 with 14%, or even life below water, SDG 14 with only 15%. Interesting is, and that's what we showed here with those black lines, the relation of defining a contribution to the SDGs with the material topics. You remember 100% of the companies said that climate change is material. Here you see SDG 13 or SDG 7, which is affordable and clean energy, both aspects of the climate topic. They are only having contribution numbers of 71 or 42%. So there is a gap between materiality of topics and contribution to the SDGs, which is a little bit surprising and leads to the question, why is this case? Why are those dimensions not connected? And do the companies miss out a chance here to create an overarching context for their efforts? What you see here is the overall score, which we gave for the current state of reporting on materiality and strategy. The overall average is 64 of all 100 possible points. Bottom of class is only 11% of all points, and best in class 99. Again, you see something which is typical for all of our results. We have good examples, we have poor examples. And the good news about this is that there are a lot of good examples to learn from. That's why I brought with me the top scorer in Sustainability Focus 2024, which is the energy company EDF, which has the most points. And I also show you the results for stakeholder inclusiveness, 60% of all possible points, bottom of class 0 points, best in class 96 points. You see also here the quality ranges from very poor to excellent, and the top scorers here are 4, which is Deutsche Telekom, Porsche, Group SEB, and STO or STO as the 4th top scorer in Stakeholder Inclusiveness 2024. With that, I lead over to my last topic, value chain, which is one important principle because we all expect companies that this topic and that, what's it called, that Verantwortung, responsibility is not excluded from reporting. We don't want to drink coffee or eat chocolate or have a car battery which is connected to sufferings or to damage of nature. And if you ever used a slave calculator, it's really shocking if you see the amount of slaves they give you when you type in your consumer usage. And on the other side, you have a lot of reports which suggest that we do not have a problem here. What the regulator does is to take into account, to hold the companies to account and make this dimension a very important principle of reporting. And I want to show you what CSRD and the federal government of Germany are saying. So CSRD says the due diligence process covers the company's entire value chain, including its own activities, its products and services, its business relationships, and its supply chains, which is very broad, covering upstream and downstream. And then from the federal government, you read that the federal government expects all companies to fulfill their human rights due diligence obligations, both in Germany and their global business activities. Then research on global activities of our sample, you see that this is an issue for our sample. And therefore, I want to show you again the obligation of the global community with the SDG 8 in this context for decent work and economic growth. And you see that if you dive into the details of this sustainable development goals, that you have 3 major goals which the companies can contribute to. One is 8.5, which says that by 2030, with SDG 8, we want to achieve full and productive employment and decent work for all women and men, including young people and people with disabilities, and equal pay for work of equal value. Then with target 8.7 is said that forced labor, modern slavery, human trafficking and child labor should be resolved, especially child labor, which should be resolved by 2024-5, which is next year. And if you look at the numbers, you might wonder, how can we make this? We understand we can't. And the last target is 8.8, which talks about protecting labor rights and promote a safe and secure working environment for all workers, including the migrant workers, in particular women migrant workers, and people in precarious employment. And again, our companies are highly globalized, and why we marked SDG 5 and SDG 10 here shows you that also the SDGs have interdependencies. They are connected with each other, so no goal is just to be looked at isolated. In an ideal world, decent work and economic growth are not a contradiction. If you look at the numbers and statistics, we have to say it still is. In some areas, we can see that there's also not a moving forward, but a stepping backward in the progress. Those numbers come from the International Trade Union Confederation, ITUC, and they say that the proportion of countries in which employees are excluded from labor law protection have risen from 58% in 2014 to 77% in 2023. That's just a huge increase. The same is for the proportion of countries in which employees are exposed to violence. This has increased slightly from 29% in 2014 to 30% in 2023. But again, also 30% is not something we should accept here, living in safe areas as in Germany. And I think this data is shocking. Also, if you look at other statistics, worldwide, we have more than 160 million children, 63 million girls, and 97 million boys that are affected by child labor. And 79 million children even perform hazardous labor. So this is something which is really shocking, and which shows that it's really important for companies to take action and to provide sound information here, not just for their own activities, but along their whole value chain creation processes. What we know and what is also respected by ESRS, that this is complicated and complex. Therefore, we have this phase-ins for value chain information, but it's like asking yourself, what was first, chicken or egg? We have to start with data and not stick on discussing the chicken-egg problem, but to start creating data for stakeholders to take into account or to check the work of companies in these areas. Sorry. So how did our sample perform in describing their value chains? This is what you can see here. Our sample reaches on average 51% of all possible points, bottom of class 0 points, and best in class 97. The value chains are still not fully described in many reports. And let's take a look on first the best or the top scorers in this area from which you can learn, which would be Deutsche Telekom and Gerresheimer. Here you can see what a full description of value chain could comprise. And if you want to know it right now without looking in the report, I brought you some detailed data. Here you can see the percentage of companies reporting on risks stemming for their supply chain as one of the aspects which we have evaluated. 76 talk about environmental risks, 79% about risks regarding human rights. And then only 69% of the reports or companies report on conducting surveys of the environmental and or social performance, which is an auditing process. And if you want to know from those who report on it, on how they did it, the numbers go down further. The method used for supplier assessment is only 40% of the companies giving information to this, and 29% on details on assessment, audit, type, scope, frequency, and supply chain certification, and expectation and targets for supplier on environmental impact in mitigation in contracts, same number. And if we look at the same question regarding the human rights, we have the same picture as we have it for the environmental aspects. But to give you an idea of what we are looking for when we talk about description of value chains, that's one of the aspects. The second thing is a topic which is for ESRS workers in the value chain, S2. And again, to show you how many companies say that this is a material topic, it's only 64%. And from this 64% who we have tested in this area of workers in the value chain reporting, we have a low reporting quality of 31% in average, last in class 1, best in class 77%, best in class 77%. So again, a great variety of reporting quality, a great spectrum, and a lot to learn. Here I show you differences in quality for the same aspect for our energy sample. Those are screenshots from our benchmark reports, and you see that I took randomly one energy company and ran it through the whole sample of energy peer group, and the average is only 29%. The best in class is only 44%. So this sector can learn from different sectors when we memorize that the best in class for the overall sample was much higher. Who to learn from? That's Hugo Boss. That's our top scorer in Workers in the Value Chain 2024. They have given the most information on this topic. So if you want to take a look, then this would be the reports we recommend. And this leads over to my conclusion. I hope that I could express that principles on reporting is about providing context, and not only in the sense of comply or explain. It's about showing on how your it's about showing how your own evaluations have come about. It's about showing the data, methods, and insights you have used or processed. And for those of you who are very far, it's also to relate your own performance and goals to social goals and challenges, to show on how you contribute with your performance to those interests which are relevant around the globe. With this, I come to an end. You see our next webinars. And Claudius, do we have any questions?
Yes, we have. As a quick reminder for our participants, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function in the menu bar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. First question, Ariane, is regarding the materiality of certain topics on slide 19. What platform are you talking about when you discuss the materiality of certain topics? Could you give some more insights on that?
There are many platforms which you can use. For what I showed was Encore Nature, which is a platform which allows you to select your industry, and it's really, you have a broader definition of industry or sectors, and then you can define industries and sub-industries within the sector. It's really nice to see, is there something which I should take into consideration? And you get a lot of data, you get global data, something we can highly recommend to use.
Great, thank you. What are the biggest mistakes that you have discovered in the ESG reporting from smaller companies in your samples?
In our first webinar, we looked at the top scorers and we tried to evaluate what they make different. And what we could see is that size matters also. It doesn't matter that much. So I think one really big challenge is the reporting curriculum. So it's not only a question if you are small or big, but the more your business model and your value chains are connected to different material topics, the more data you need to generate, the more aspects you have to evaluate. And that's a very complex task, especially because of the interdependencies, which I showed during the webinar. So there are many sources of mistakes to answer the question and too many to give you an answer. And there is not a particular question which I would say is a typical one for smaller companies. If I memorize the dialogues I have with smaller companies, I could only see as a common thing is to think that you can do ESRS compliant report within one reporting season. That's a mistake, because the materiality assessment is already that complex and of such, you have to involve the whole organization to do it. So you need to have time for that. And the lower your performance score is, the more time you need to come to a compliant reporting. That's just a matter.
Let's stay with complexity. We saw a big gap between impact materiality and financial materiality. Based on your experience, what are the biggest challenges for companies in terms of evaluating the financial materiality and having a high quality reporting on that?
Financial materiality, as I said, is something which is new to a lot of companies, although we could think it's not the case, since the main driver for a company is to be economically successful. But financial materiality asks to consider a lot of perspectives. So one we talk about often is the RO perspective, the risks and opportunities. But in order to evaluate those risks and opportunities, you have to look at different dimensions. Here you can take a look at the implementation guidance of the EFRAG, and you see that it's taking into account the effects on your resources, and resources are not only natural resources, for example, also human resources are a big case, or legal resources. You have to take into account how your stakeholders will react. Remember, two groups are the ones who are supposed to make you very much accountable as a company, those who finance the Green Deal and those who have a general interest on that companies take their responsibility. And those effects are also to be evaluated in the dimension of financial materiality. And then it's also effects on cash flows and so on. So it's a lot of different things you have to evaluate. And also the rating agencies, for example, as one stakeholder group. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's stay with the materiality. Could you give some guidance on how to avoid mistakes in doing the double materiality assessment?
That's
tricky question, huh?
Yeah, I could talk for this on this for hours.
Yeah.
But I think it's maybe important to limit it down. When you do research, you know that you always have to take into consideration your sources. You have to think about data quality, about reliability. And I think with the double materiality assessment, it's the same. You have to you have to be transparent on how you come to a conclusion. You need a lot of information. And if you do not have the data yourself to assess, for example, value chain effects, then you have to look for data coming from external sources. And as I said, there are many sources, many platforms. Those two I mentioned today, Encore and UNEP Sector Impact Max, are only two examples. So for example, the Climate Action Tracker is one possibility to look for climate risks. And there are so many data and best practice examples out there that I would say, take this opportunity and learn from them and accelerate your own learning process by using this already existing data and insights.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And last but not least, the SDGs are also associated with accusations like greenwashing or so-called rainbow washing.
Yes.
Would you still recommend to use them?
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah, because I think, as I said, it's one of the opportunities to give a greater contextualization to your own data and to your own efforts, because it's not only about what you are doing, it's about contributing, as I said, to the transition of a sustainable economy. And this can only be achieved if every company and every single one of us, also we are as individuals, are asked to contribute. And the SDGs are a very good way of understanding the challenges connected to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. I think overall it's 169 subtopics which are in this 17 goals. So a lot of ways and ideas on how to think about your own sustainability and to give context to your own progresses. So yes, I would recommend, and I would also recommend to go a step further and look for other ways to contextualize too.
Great. So for the moment, we don't have any open questions. If you have any follow-up questions afterwards, please feel free to contact us and we will get back to you. So therefore, back to you, Ariane.
Thank you very much for joining us today. And I hope we have given you an idea why contextualization and reporting principles are so important. And we would welcome you or like to welcome you back to our next webinar on environmental topics. And so far,